Vauxhall built cars in Luton for a full 120 years. Through 2 world wars and through every recession Britain has genuinely lived through across the 20th and 21st centuries, surviving conditions that closed plenty of other British factories long before Stellantis ever existed as a company at all. In November 2024, Stellantis announced it was closing the plant for good, with the final shutdown landing in April 2025 and roughly 1,100 jobs going with it in a single decision. Stellantis blamed the UK's own zero-emission vehicle mandate for making the site unviable, a regulatory scapegoat that's become almost routine for this parent company whenever a national plant closure needs a tidy public explanation. It's a genuinely painful story on its own, and this channel isn't going to pretend otherwise. It's also not a British story at all. Not really. It's the exact pattern this channel has already documented on DS, Lancia and Abarth, just landing on a brand that happens to carry a British badge instead of a French one or Italian one this time around. This channel went through the closure filings, the union statements and the market share data Stellantis would rather you didn't decompose yourself, to work out precisely what's actually happening to Vauxhall underneath the heritage headline rather than simply accepting the version written for a press release. Subscribe if you want the next one of these before the story gets flattened into a single sentimental news segment and forgotten by the following week. When we covered the zombie brands already hollowed out under Stellantis ownership, DS, Lancia, Abarth, several of you asked in the comments why Vauxhall wasn't on that list. It wasn't on it because it deserves its own video entirely, not a single paragraph buried in a longer one. The ownership history explains why the fall has taken longer to become visible. Vauxhall has been building cars in Britain since 1903, growing into one of the country's oldest and most familiar automotive names, older than most of the brands this channel has ever covered on a closure video. For decades, it operated as the British manufacturing arm of General Motors, with a genuinely distinctive engineering identity that generations of British families bought into without a second thought. A Vauxhall in the driveway meant something specific for most of the 20th century, the way a Ford or a Morris did, a name that didn't need explaining to anyone who'd grown up in Britain. That identity started dissolving the moment GM sold Vauxhall and its German sister brand Opel to the French PSA Group in 2017, ending well over 80 years of American ownership in a single transaction most ordinary buyers barely noticed at the time. It dissolved further when PSA merged with Fiat Chrysler in January 2021 to form Stellantis outright, folding Vauxhall into a 14-brand conglomerate assembled from the wreckage of at least 3 separate national automotive industries, where it now competes internally, brand against brand, for the same finite pool of investment against Peugeot, Citroen, Fiat, Alfa Romeo, Jeep, DS, Lancia and Abarth and everything else sitting under the same corporate roof. That internal competition matters more than it sounds like it should on paper, because a 14-brand group doesn't invest evenly across all 14 names on its books. It invests where the projected return looks strongest on a spreadsheet in Amsterdam, reviewed by executives who've never set foot in Luton and never needed to. And a 120-year British factory with a shrinking domestic passenger car share was never going to win that argument against a newer, more export-friendly site once the numbers were laid side by side in a boardroom. 2 ownership changes in 4 years, and by the time Stellantis had full and complete control, the modern Vauxhall range had already stopped being distinctively British engineered in any meaningful sense at all. It's now largely rebadged architecture shared across Peugeot, Citroen and Fiat, the same platform sharing hollowing out this channel has already traced in detail through DS, Lancia and Abarth. Vauxhall isn't being singled out for being British in any of this, whatever the emotional headlines around Luton implied at the time it was announced. It's simply the next name on a list Stellantis has been working through methodically across its entire European portfolio, brand by brand, market by market, country by country. The Luton closure itself follows the same playbook this channel has come to recognize from Stellantis specifically, right down to the timing and the choice of language used to justify it. The announcement landed in November 2024, the shutdown in April 2025. 5 months' notice for a plant that has stood in the same town for well over a century, employing generations from the same families. Roughly 1,100 jobs went with it directly, alongside a knock-on hit to the local supply chain and community that doesn't show up in any headline job loss figure but is very real indeed for the small businesses that existed specifically to service the plant and its workforce day to day. Stellantis is relocating operations, machinery and process knowledge to its Ellesmere Port site over in Cheshire, backed by a £50 million investment, and the official explanation leans entirely on regulation. The UK's zero-emission vehicle mandate required 22% of new car sales and 10% of new van sales to be zero-emission in 2024. And Stellantis argued that continuing to build combustion vehicles at Luton under that quota simply didn't add up anymore financially. That's a real regulatory pressure, and this channel isn't going to pretend the ZEV mandate is imaginary, invented for this video, or that compliance with it comes free of any genuine cost to a manufacturer. The quota isn't standing still either. It rises from 22% this year to 80% by 2030. The same escalating mandate this channel has already covered, pressuring German manufacturers into their own EV discounting spirals on the continent. Which means whatever calculations Stellantis ran on Luton in 2024 was only ever going to get harder to justify with each passing year, regardless of which decision it made at the time. But regulation applies to every manufacturer selling in Britain, not just Stellantis. And only one of them chose to close a 120-year-old plant outright rather than invest to adapt it the way Ellesmere Port itself was previously adapted. Unite the Union didn't soften its language when the closure landed, and it's worth hearing the actual words rather than a paraphrased summary of them written to sound more measured than the reality on the ground. The union called it a complete slap in the face and a betrayal of a workforce that had met every single production target it was ever given. Language that doesn't get used lightly by any organization that still has to negotiate with the same parent company at other sites afterwards. Stellantis rejected counter-proposals from the UK government, including offers of financial support and an extended timeline to find an alternative, without granting so much as a face-to-face dialogue to discuss any of them properly at any point during the process. That's worth sitting with for a moment rather than skipping past as a minor procedural detail. A foreign-owned conglomerate declining to even meet the elected government of the country whose workforce it was about to make redundant, on a site that had operated within that country's borders for well over a century and never missed one production target it was set. Behind closed doors, union leadership secured relocation packages for a fraction of the workforce moving across to Ellesmere Port, a negotiated outcome that at least gave some workers a path forward. Everyone outside that fraction faced forced redundancy in a town that had built a meaningful part of its economic identity around the factory for generations, with no equivalent employer of that scale waiting nearby to absorb them into comparable work at comparable pay. Stellantis' own position throughout this has been that this was an unavoidable response to the UK's regulatory environment, which conveniently reframes a deliberate choice to sacrifice a 120-year British manufacturing legacy as a matter of external necessity rather than a decision made specifically to protect the parent group's global margins at the expense of one national workforce, in one town, that had done nothing wrong by any measure Stellantis itself has publicly acknowledged. Here's the part that should genuinely worry anyone who assumes Ellesmere Port is now the safe half of this story. The happy ending Stellantis has been keen to attach its £50 million figure to whenever the closure comes up in conversation. Sold publicly as the future of the brand's UK manufacturing, Ellesmere Port currently employs around 950 people and was rebuilt specifically as an electric-only plant a few years ago at a real capital cost. Now building zero-emission versions of the Vauxhall Combo alongside the Citroën Berlingo, Peugeot Partner and Fiat Doblo, the same shared platform pattern showing up again even at the one site being presented as the rescue rather than the risk. On the same production line, wearing 4 different badges on 4 otherwise near-identical vans. Despite the £50 million relocation investment landing there on top of the site's existing infrastructure, the site's long-term profitability is genuinely uncertain rather than secured because it demands heavily on exports at a time when domestic UK demand for electric cars remains relatively weak compared to what the plant was built to produce. That leaves all 950 of those jobs sitting exposed to exactly the same kind of Stellantis cost discipline that just closed Luton, dressed up this time as a solution rather than a problem for the workforce being told to feel relieved that their site was the one chosen to receive the investment rather than absorb the closure. Nobody currently celebrating the Ellesmere Port investment as the good half of this story appears to have seriously asked what happens if the export demand doesn't hold up over the next few years, the way domestic demand for electric vans hasn't so far, and given how quickly Stellantis moved on Luton once the calculation there stopped adding up in the boardroom single review, there's no obvious reason to assume Ellesmere Port would be treated any differently if its own numbers ever told the same story a few years from now. Now look at the market share numbers Stellantis and its supporters have been pointing to as proof the brand is actually recovering rather than simply managing a slower decline, because the headline figure doesn't survive being taken apart properly once you separate what's actually being counted. SMMT data for the first half of 2026 shows Vauxhall's combined car and van market share climbing to 4.8%, moving the brand up from 6th to 4th place year on year. A genuine sounding recovery story on the surface, exactly the kind of number a press release is built to lead with. Decompose it and the picture changes completely. That growth is being driven overwhelmingly by a 28% surge in van registrations. Commercial fleet sales, rather than the retail cars ordinary drivers are actually choosing between on a forecourt on a Saturday afternoon, and fleet buyers making purchasing decisions on entirely different terms, leasing costs, tax treatment, contract renewal cycles, than a family weighing up a new Corsa against a Toyota Yaris with their own money. Look specifically at the passenger car market for June 2026 taken entirely on its own, stripped entirely of the van figures propping up the combined headline number, and Vauxhall's own share sits at just 3.56% overall, behind Tesla of 5.71% and Toyota at 4.23%. Two names that a decade ago would barely have registered as serious rivals in Vauxhall's own segment. A brand that once outsold both of those names comfortably for decades without anyone seriously questioning its position in the market is now behind an EV-only newcomer that didn't exist as a mainstream UK seller a decade ago, and a Japanese reliability specialist that never needed a heritage story or a badge with 100 years of history behind it to sell cars. The one genuine bright spot in all of this is real and worth naming, honestly, rather than dismissing out of pure contrarianism for its own sake. The Corsa remains Britain's best-selling super mini, holding 13% of its segment year-to-date in 2026, a number most rival super minis on sale to date would genuinely envy outright. But even the Corsa is built on shared underpinnings with the Peugeot 208 and the new Fiat 600 rather than anything genuinely Vauxhall's own. The exact same platform sharing arrangement this channel already traced through the Lancia Ypsilon shared Peugeot 208 and Opel Corsa underpinnings in the Zombie Brands video. Vauxhall's single biggest seller and Lancia's entire current model range are, underneath the badge, closer relatives than either brand's marketing department would ever want a customer standing on a forecourt to actually notice, sharing floor pans, suspension geometry, and most of the parts a mechanic would actually order to fix either one. None of that macro pattern is abstract for anyone who already owns a Vauxhall either, and it's worth being direct about the risk rather than leaving it unsaid out of politeness. This channel has already shown what happens to residual values and parts availability once a brand's manufacturing footprint starts visibly shrinking in a market. It isn't instant, and Vauxhall isn't an orphan brand in the way a fully exited marquee is, but the direction of travel matters more than the current snapshot ever will. A brand that's just closed a 120-year domestic plant, that's leaning on van sales to mask a genuine passenger car decline, and that builds its remaining range on shared Stellantis platforms rather than dedicated engineering, is a brand whose long-term parts and service ecosystem depends increasingly on decisions made in Paris and Turin rather than anywhere in Britain. That doesn't mean panic selling a perfectly good Corsa or Astra tomorrow morning, and this channel isn't in the business of manufacturing alarm where none is warranted yet. It means going into any future Vauxhall purchases with eyes open about who actually controls the supply chain behind the badge, understanding that the answer has changed twice in under a decade, and that there's no particular reason to assume it's finished changing given everything else documented here. Put the pattern together across the whole Stellantis portfolio rather than looking at Vauxhall in isolation the way most coverage of the Luton closure has, and the strategy stops looking like a series of unconnected national tragedies and starts looking like exactly what it actually is. One company running the identical playbook on every heritage brand it owns, adjusted only for which country's workforce absorbs the closure and which country's regulation gets blamed publicly for it afterwards. DS gets hollowed out in France, its European sales falling over 20% in a single year while dealers report registrations that barely register against the rest of the market. A brand running on badge engineering and a name most French buyers under 30 barely recognize anymore. Lancia gets reduced to a single shared platform hatchback in Italy, propped up by a name nobody outside the country recognizes anymore, and a rumored second model that existed as a name and nothing else for longer than most buyers would tolerate waiting. Abarth loses its entire combustion identity to an EV pivot its own enthusiast base never asked for and never wanted, watching UK sales collapse by more than 70% in a single year as a direct result of that decision. Vauxhall loses a 120-year manufacturing site in Britain, and its German sister brand Opel is absorbing platform sharing pressure of its own at the exact same time, under the exact same parent company, for the exact same underlying reason. A reason that has far less to do with any single country's specific regulation than the brand's own press releases would have you believe every time a closure lands. Stellantis isn't uniquely hostile to Britain, whatever the closure headlines implied at the time. It simply run the same closure, the same platform consolidation, and the same blame the local regulation script often enough across enough countries that Luton was never going to be an exception once its turn eventually came round on the schedule. None of that makes the loss any smaller for the 1,100 people who worked at Luton, or the 950 whose jobs at Ellesmere Port now carry a risk most coverage hasn't bothered to explain properly, choosing the easier headline about investment over the harder question of export dependency that actually determines whether those jobs survive the decade. A 120-year manufacturing history doesn't survive on sentiment once a parent company has decided the site no longer earns its keep against the rest of a 14-brand portfolio competing for the same pool of money. And Vauxhall's own sales data shows a brand papering over a genuine passenger car decline, with a van registration surge that flatters the combined headline without changing what's actually happening to ordinary buyers choosing between a Corsa and a Tesla on the same forecourt this weekend. Unite the Union called it a betrayal, and on the evidence gathered here, the rejected government talks, the 5 months notice on a 120-year site, the same script already run on DS, Lancia and Abarth elsewhere in Europe, and now on Vauxhall's own doorstep. That word holds up under scrutiny rather than reading as ordinary union rhetoric written for the cameras and forgotten within a news cycle. Does the badge on a Vauxhall still mean anything to you now than the metal underneath it is Peugeot, Citroen and Fiat wearing a different grille and a different name? Or did that stop mattering the moment Luton's gates shut for good and nobody in Paris felt the need to explain why to the town itself? Tell me in the comments, because that's usually where the next one of these starts.